let us call this meeting to order, and if the clerk would call the roll, please.
Eric?
Here.
Jay?
Here.
Kurt?
Kurt, are you on the line?
Bob?
Here.
Nancy?
Yes.
Cindy?
Here.
Mark?
Here.
All right. And now, if you would please stand for the voluntary Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All righty. And the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by members Stanton Greger and seconded by member Strand to approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is amendment and approval of the meeting agenda. Do we have any amendments for the meeting agenda? Hearing none. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second. So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? All right. Next item on the agenda is public hearings, and we do not have any, nor do we have any bid awards. So the very next item on the agenda is visitors' views related to the agenda. And,
Wait.
oh, Flo is over there waving her hand, so.
Hello, my name is Flo Wallen, and I'm here representing today the Petersburg Community Foundation. I'll just pass around a little, if you don't know what it's about, our little flyer.
Thank you.
And I'm just here to speak on behalf of a letter that we wrote you requesting some space, office space, and answer any questions. We just briefly are affiliated with the Alaska Community Foundation that was implemented in 1995 by the Rasmussen Foundation, their philanthropy group, one of the largest in the country now, that felt really strongly about philanthropy in Alaska and has a few community foundations around the state. We're one of, I believe there's about 11. And Petersburg's was founded in 2009. And we are tasked with helping the nonprofits in our community survive and do the best they can. And so slowly but surely over the course of the last 8 years or so, we've grown a foundation fund of almost $500,000, of which we take a percentage of that and award to many, many nonprofits throughout our community. And so one of the things we were lucky enough to, the state was lucky enough to get involved in, we are now have a staff member, and some of the other community foundations also have now new staff members, which is a new thing. And so with that comes the requirement of having some space for them. And so as a group, we decided to come to you first. And Liz Cabrera mentioned that there was an empty desk. This person works roughly about 20 to 25 hours a month. So it's not a big, huge time commitment. Doubtful that they'll spend even half of that time sitting behind a desk. A lot of it is just getting out and working with the nonprofits, as well as just kind of formulating the business that we do. So going into the post office and talking to different groups, things like that. So anyway, that's where that letter came from. And if there's any questions, I'll see if I can answer them. Otherwise, we appreciate your...
Is there any space in particular you had your eye on, Glow?
Well, Liz mentioned that she had an extra desk downstairs in her office that might work, but if there's another space, that would be great too. We don't have any preference. We're just looking for support.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
And because I know there are other folks that want to speak to items on the agenda, we're going to limit testimony to 3 minutes. And I understand that Mr. Beebe is on the line and would like to speak. Somebody on the line does not have their phone on mute, and so we're hearing a lot of loopy noises. So if you are not speaking at the moment, if you can put your phone on mute, that would be really helpful. And Dave, if you're on, you've got your 3 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is David. I'm representing the city of Kukunoff. Is this coming across all right?
It is.
HR 232 seeks to transfer to the state of Alaska up to 2 million acres of the publicly owned Thomas National to 3,125 square miles for the combined surface area of 15 mid-cross islands. First, the Thomas Timber Program is historically necessitating federal taxpayer subsidies, including well over $1 billion to offset these competitive disadvantages the Southeast timber industry has always faced on the global marketplace as a result of high operation and transportation costs. This bill would transfer to the state of Alaska during a period of extended fiscal crisis from the notoriously money-losing Thomas Timber Program, a loss of 95 cents or greater for every U.S. dollar, taxpayer dollar spent. This inherent industry disadvantage is also by the latest Alaska Division of Forestry's annual report of fiscal year 2015. That report documents administrative costs of $5.3 million, but with revenues of about $717,000, demonstrating a loss of 86 cents for every dollar spent executing its existing statewide timber sale program. Keep in mind, the state of Alaska's current budget shortfall already demonstrates its inability to oversee, plan, and manage a more than fourfold increase the bill would impose, and in other words, a fourfold increase in the existing plan. The fact is the state of Alaska lacks sufficient revenue, legislative, and regulatory means to existing state forests in order to fulfill its constitutional obligations to manage, quote, fish, forests, and wildlife in order to provide, including reliable local access to sustainable subsistence resources. HR 232's revenue negative consequences directly decreases the ability to fund government services while indirectly increasing the money taken out of the pockets of all Alaskans by the imposition of new and higher levels of taxation along with a reduced permanent term dividend. We urge you to pass this resolution in opposition to HR 232. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dave. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to items on the agenda, related to the agenda? Richard.
Hello, I'm Richard Burke. I'm representing myself on the ATV and side-by-side ballot initiative. I think Petersburg would be a better place if people had the freedom to make their own decisions, especially when it comes to riding ATVs on city streets and operating side-by-sides.
Just a second. Can you put the folks who are on the phone, can you put your phones on mute?
I don't know which button to push, or I would. You could also just pull that mic away from you, too.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
Go ahead, Richard.
ATVs are great on gas. They take up no space on the road, well, half the space of a normal car. They're cheap on insurance, and today after the radio show, I called my insurance agent, $22.60 for an entire year for my ATV. Yeah, I think this would be great for Petersburg, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Anyone have any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, Richard, when I look at your questions for the ballot, yes and no on your, and what you're proposing for an ordinance, have you talked with the police chief about that and whether or not it's implementable and whether or not it's something that he could reasonably use?
Yes, I did speak with the police chief. He wanted to remain neutral on it. He didn't say anything in it was not implementable, but he didn't say either way.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question just about, feedback isn't terrible. I had a question about the insurance policy you had. You said it was less than $30, and is that for enough coverage to be able to cover any sort of vehicle you might run into in these streets or any type of?
Yes. When I spoke with my insurance agent, State Farm in Juneau, I was very clear that this was for allowing ATVs on city streets. They're very much aware that I would be riding my ATV on borough streets. And the coverages that they quoted me for are the same as the minimums for a regular passenger car. So they would definitely cover me if I ran into somebody's pickup.
Go ahead, Bob.
As part of your question, what about liability insurance? Did that include liability insurance?
That is liability insurance.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Doug Fleming. I'm here representing myself. I live at 104 Lewis Lane here in Petersburg. And I'm speaking in opposition of H.R. 232 as well. Although there's many reasons, I think, to not support this, and many are listed in the resolution that is before us tonight, I'm only going to focus on fish, which is more my area. Alaska's had the luck or previous good fortune to learn from and not necessarily repeat the same mistakes that led other Pacific Northwest states to declines in wild salmon production, where unfortunately more politically charged and information-poor decisions occur in our state more and more. I'd like to urge the borough to not support H.R. 232's transfer, since the current Forest Service best management practices under T-Lump will continue to offer better protections for fish and fish habitat than under the state of Alaska's Forest Resources and Practice Act, known as FERPA. In short, by supporting the proposed action, more land area within fish-producing watersheds in transferred lands can be clear-cut, along with fewer protections like stream buffers in upstream Class 3 and 4 streams, which contribute to the more productive areas downstream. Maintaining fish habitat quality, access to that habitat, and adequate escapements can produce sustainable assets to all fishery sectors each year to the local, regional, and state economy. However, the proposed action may impact a number of streams for many years with the degraded conditions in exchange for a very brief timber harvest opportunity. By supporting this and like proposals to seek to ease industry restrictions are another way to chip away at our fisheries' future and end up like Washington, Oregon, and other states which rely on hatchery production and have numerous ESA listings. In the last couple of years, we've been witnessing poorer harvests in many of our salmon fisheries here in Alaska, although poor marine survival, believed to be linked to localized warming ocean conditions in the Gulf of Alaska. In essence, this has been an unwanted shift in local oceanic habitat quality. And we all eagerly await for the conditions to return that again will lead to bumper salmon returns and stronger than forecast harvests. In essence, we all want these ocean feeding areas to be fertile again, right? So please think why our community would ever support this or other proposals that would in any way diminish the protection of these fish streams if what we really want is productive fish habitat, its sustainability, and the salmon paid out as dividends and interest each year for our investment and careful stewardship. Clearly, fish support Petersburg, so shouldn't it be that Petersburg be supporting fish? Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to items related to the agenda? Go ahead.
Excuse me.
And if you can identify yourself.
Good evening, Borough Assembly and everybody present and everybody listening on KFSK. My name is Mike Stainbrook, and I live on Birch Street, and I'm representing myself. I'd like to start off stating my support for Resolution 2017-7, a resolution asking the Borough Assembly to weigh in on the Federal House of Representatives Bill 232 and to state clearly that that this federal bill, as it is written, is not in the borough's best interest. We can do better by sticking with the U.S. Forest Service fish stream and the wildlife habitat protection. Thanks, salmon and deer. Economically, it would be unsound in our state's economic condition to consider purchasing federal land at fair market value or to like-kind exchange, as stated in the bill on page 5, lines 13 down to 18. I want to see the forest jobs stay in this town, so I ask the Assembly to please consider Resolution 2017 favorably and vote yes tonight to make an important statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Listen. And thank you, everyone, for keeping to 3 minutes and under.
Good evening. My name is Becky Knight, and I'm speaking for the Greater Southeast Alaska Conservation Community. We previously submitted a detailed statement to the Assembly in opposition to H.R. 232. Although correct elsewhere in the document, please note there is one typo in the regarding header that referred to H.R. 23 instead of H.R. 232. Crafted for and by the timber industry and with no public involvement, this proposed legislation would result in conversion of the acquired old-growth acres to a plantation-style monoculture tree farm. As detailed in our statement, there are several problems associated with the legislation, the aim of which is to circumvent our nation's bedrock environmental laws and provide nearly unfettered access to the remaining stands of southeast old-growth forests, the backbone of sustainable fish and wildlife populations in southeast Alaska. First, as we detailed in our statement, the State Forest Resources and Practices Act, or FERPA, which governs state forests and is in dire need of revision, allows essentially zero time for the public to become fully informed and engage in a timber project prior to a decision. In short, you could be away on a fishing trip and return to learn that your favorite hunting grounds are about to be clear-cut. Individuals, as well as a public body such as your assembly, would find it nearly impossible to engage in this process. The FERPA has no limit on the size of clear-cuts, provides no consideration for cumulative impacts, and has no enforceable provisions to address public safety regarding landslide risk. There's no limit on round log export of state timber. Moreover, it has no enforceable provisions to protect wildlife habitat and has weaker no-cut buffer protections for fish habitat. Second, in contrast to the multiple-use mandate of our national forest, FERPA specifies the primary purpose in the establishment of state forests is timber management. In its design and decision-making on timber sales and the Southeast State Forest Plan, the Division of Forestry interprets this as permission to run roughshod over other natural resources. Third, despite all the shortcuts the state employs on planning and administration of timber sales, the program is still a big money loser. Historically, the state's timber program has returned revenues of 10 cents for every dollar spent on operating expenditures. Nonetheless, the benefit to the state from timber sale revenues is often touted with no mention of the net loss. Moreover, the state's budget crisis is a clear economic constraint affecting the administration of its timber sales staff, and increasingly the division is using staff from other regions to fill in. Compliance monitoring is a shadow of its historic functioning. If H.R. 232 is enacted, not only would the state acquire expanses of old-growth timber, roads, bridges, cabins, and other Tongass infrastructure, but they would also inherit the repair and maintenance of that infrastructure. Quite simply, there's no supporting evidence that the state can realize a net financial gain. And I guess that's my 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Did you want to speak?
Hello, my name is Christina Sargent, and I'm here representing myself. And I just wanted to address my support for Resolution 2007-07, which is in opposition to the H.R. 232 bill. There's a variety of reasons why I don't believe that transferring this land into state control is the best use of the land. I think the Forest Service does a good job of allowing for multiple use, and I'm concerned that the Southeast State Forest Plan is emphasis too heavily on the timber production of the forest and not enough on the multiple use. I know personally I do a lot of use for firewood cutting, for foraging, for hunting, fishing, all of these kind of things, and I'm sure everyone else in this room does a lot of those as well. But so that's just a personal reason why I'm opposed to it. On another issue is the amount of money that goes to the school district from, for example, the Secure Rural Schools program. And now, you are probably aware that it has not been renewed for 2016. And going forward, whether it will be renewed in the future is anyone's guess. With the current political situation, it seems unlikely, but there have been instances in the past where this, like in 2014, where the Secure Rural Schools was not originally funded and then was added back into the budget. So there is some possibility going forward that this program would be still relevant. I wanted to, and I apologize, I don't have copies for everyone, but a few numbers. I always think it's important to look at some of the numbers. So the first table you're looking at here is simply the amount of funding that the Forest Service provided to the state of Alaska from the Secure Rural Schools program. So for the last 5 years, for the entire state, the amount of funding came between $15 million to $9.8 million. Between the last 5 years. From that, the Tongass region got between just over 7 million to just over 11 million, averaging over the last 5 years. Petersburg School District specifically, for the 3 years that we've been a borough, had received between $577,000 and $1,255,000. So this just gives you a little general idea of the amount of funding that comes from this program. And now, if 2 million acres of the Tongass were transferred to state funding, the amount of money that we would potentially, the amount of money that could potentially be lost, that's on the final column here for the entire state. You're looking at something like $1.3 million as a high average or a low of maybe $850,000. Petersburg specifically could potentially lose something like $60,000 to $100,000 in funding. And I came up with those numbers simply based on the fact that the Petersburg Borough District comes as about 10.8% of the Tongass National Forest. And if you remove that 10.8% from the 2 million acres, that would be roughly the loss of revenue. Now, that's probably a low ball estimate, because if you look at some of the maps in the estimate, suggested land that's transferred, a lot more than 10.8% of those 2 million acres is actually within the Petersburg district. So that's just a low end. On the other hand,
to be fair, I need to keep it to 3 minutes. And
okay,
someone
sorry.
Hello, I'm Chelsea Tremblay. I'm representing myself, and I'm here to support the resolution in opposition to 232. It's, in my opinion, a bad bill that transfers the 2 million acres to an agency we already have difficulty working with when it comes to public interest. Just recently, we had to deal with the state basically threatening to log areas that threaten people's homes as almost a ploy to get the federal land transfer. There was this whole process. People, we all know, we all listen to all the meetings. And it'd be nice to not have to deal with that again, to come out in front of an issue like that instead of playing on the defense and just hoping that everything would work out in our favor. And that's in addition to the herbicide roadside spraying issue that we again had to do a lot of effort with the state agencies on. And so, yeah, that's my question, is why put ourselves in that position in the first place when the bill hasn't been passed? We can just get rid of a potential problem before it even starts. And I do see this as a problem, as a potential problem. There's a reason Borough out at Farragut Farm, they're living the happy farm life out there. They don't want to be having to weigh in on stuff like that. But when you look at the map and you see that Farragut Bay is one of the areas that could be threatened, and you recognize the Thomas Bay area, Midcoff Island, a lot of people come to this area. Sorry, I'm getting off my notes. So Farragut Farm would love to just exist and be our only commercial food producer in peace without having to deal with logging around their area. And they're not protected in this bill. That's something that could have been added in as a way to mitigate harm to remote communities, especially food producing people that are already a rarity in Southeast Alaska. We should support people like them and encourage more people to live their lives in peace out in places like that. Our town relies on a diversified economy dominated by fishing, with a downtown that does rely on a strong independent tourism economy taking place in the summertime. The way this bill is written, it's a short-term profit-driven concept that could hurt more than it helps in the long run. And so I take exception to comments that Petersburg has no place weighing in on an issue like this happening on the national level. We did just that when we made resolutions passing anti-transboundary mine concerns, basically expressing our concern as a region that would be negatively impacted by a bill like that. We weighed in and we helped bring it to the federal level of attention. So by doing that now, that's all we're saying, is that we don't want to be impacted negatively by this bill. So I hope council members vote to approve, or assembly members vote to approve, and thank you for your patience as we all weigh our 2 cents in.
Thank you.
Melina Marvin. I'm on Lumber Street and representing myself, I guess, as well as my business. My partner Eric and I run Schoolhouse Fish Company. We are commercial trollers here in Petersburg. And I sent you guys all an email with a lot of my thoughts, so you already have all my stats, but I just wanted to introduce myself and let everyone know that the Forest Service did study how the Tongass relates to Alaska's commercial fishing industry a couple of years ago and released a lot of interesting findings. One that sticks with me is that 80% of the coho that are caught statewide, most of which are in Southeast, spawn on the Tongass. That's a pretty phenomenal amount. I actually had to go and look back on that stat. Like, is that real? It is real. And so I think what we have on our hands is a working forest, and it's working really well for fish. And I grew up in Oregon while salmon were tanking, and let me tell you, it happens. It happened. And I think logging was the number one land management practice that we didn't plan well enough for. And we grew up hearing the commercial, Oregon will never run out of trees, and we didn't, but we did run out of salmon. And I don't think we can afford to do that in Southeast in this day and age, especially not here in Petersburg, and so I think that's why, as a community, we really do need to weigh in with the federal voice and say, hey, have a lot to lose here and not a whole lot to gain. The other thing I did want to bring up is that Eric and I just bought a huge chunk of wood from Wrangell Island. I forget the name of the guy that's still running a kind of small to mid-sized mill over there. And I have done some work with local millers around the region, enough to know that they have a hard time getting wood just to meet the demand that we have in our communities. People who want round logs, people who want milled timber for building projects. And I don't see any provisions in 232 to help those guys out. And I would love to see Petersburg work with our local small mills. I know we've got one on Mitkoff, one in Agassiz, where we also own land. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to work, have a community voice that says let's manage federal and state lands so that we can have this sustainable supply of timber for people who live here, and make those decisions together at the community level rather than the sort of larger bill, laying down a land management ethos that's really going to end up with, I think we all know, a clear-cut and export to Asia model, which is just not going to help any of us here and could have some pretty severe long-term impacts, not only for us as a commercial fishing community, but our visitor industry is really growing every year, and I think we can all see that with more and more of the smaller cruise ships coming, and a lot of our neighbors employed, taking people out to see the glaciers and kayaking. We want to serve those businesses as well. So thanks so much for listening to us, and please do make a vote and send our voice on up to the Capitol.
Thank you. Come on up.
My name is Eric Lee, and I'm representing myself. I'm a local resident here, been here all my life, and I just want to make one point. I think a lot of points were made in the commentary that Bo and Maria put together that covered everything pretty well, but one thing that I think hasn't been mentioned that is very pertinent is the fact that this is really large-scale logging they're talking about. It's not mom-and-pop operations trying to keep them afloat. It's not about that at all. And people have to recognize that, because there are folks that are sympathetic to the idea of a small timber operation industry here in town that's sustainable need to recognize that this really puts their hopes and dreams, at any idea they have of that, at risk, because what's on this chopping block to be deforested here is basically all that's left we've got. And, a small sustainable industry has to have inventory that they can count on if they're going to invest. And this would eliminate that. So I think that even those that are hopeful for a small industry locally that's sustainable should be very concerned about this, because it's not going to happen. These sales are going to be large scale. They're going to be logged, but usually almost entirely by out-of-state logging operations, and the timber is going to go out and around just like in a third world country. And when it's all done, there's not going to be much left for any hope of a sustainable logging industry here. So I think that's my main point, is it really doesn't help anybody that I can see. Not one aspect of our economy or anything here. So that was my point. I came in tonight, and I encourage you to support the resolution opposing 232. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to items related to the agenda? Oh, and I apologize. Debbie has letters that she needs to read that were submitted.
Okay.
I won't make you stick to 3 minutes.
I'll do my best. Number 1. My name is Bo Varsano, and I would like to express my concern about Don Young's bill that allows for the transfer of up to 2 million acres of the Tongass National Forest to the state of Alaska. This bill caught my attention because a large portion of the Farragut River drainage was included in the list of lands to be transferred. Farragut Bay is my home, and this bill is a direct threat to my way of life. After many hours of research, I have come to realize that what Don Young is proposing is a bad deal for everyone in Southeast Alaska. This bill was designed to achieve two major goals. Increase the amount of land under state control and create more permanent jobs in Southeast Alaska by revitalizing the timber industry. My question is, would H.R. 232 actually accomplish these goals? And are these goals in our region's best interest? Does it really benefit the state of Alaska to own a massive chunk of land in Southeast? As much as we all complain about it, I think the Forest Service does a pretty good job of managing the Tongass. They build and maintain all the cabins, trails, and roads. They work to improve or repair damaged fish habitat. They catalog cultural resources, and they study and preserve wildlife habitat. The list goes on and on. Could the state realistically do a better job of all this than the Forest Service is already doing? With these lands under Forest Service management, Alaska gets all the benefits while the federal government picks up the tab. I strongly support supplying our region's small and micro sawmills with enough logs to fill the local need for building materials. However, I do not believe that a large-scale timber industry based on old-growth logging will create a significant number of local jobs. I also don't believe that a large-scale timber industry would be economically viable in Southeast Alaska. Between 2008 and 2013, the Forest Service lost $130 million on the Tongass timber sales it administered. There are currently 2 large state forests in Southeast, both of which lose money on their timber sales. Clearly, the jobs generated by these sales cost the state of Alaska or the federal government millions of dollars to create. They are essentially jobs supported by government subsidies. In the past, many of the Southeast towns that based their economies on logging eventually suffered from the decision, and many are still trying to recover. The situation today is rapidly becoming even less conducive to a profitable timber products industry in Southeast. Globalization has produced worldwide sources for cheap, engineered wood products that are readily produced from second-growth timber and tree farms. The remoteness of Southeast adds multiple layers of expense to timber products produced here, making mass production of these products unprofitable. The only viable way for big companies to make money on Southeast timber is to export it as raw logs, and most of the potential jobs would be exported right along with them. We in Southeast are left with little but massive clear cuts, damaged salmon and wildlife habitat, a diminished tourist industry, and a large bill for developing the infrastructure required to harvest the timber. A perfect example is the recent 20 million board foot, 1,000 acre timber sale that is taking place on the Haines State Forest. Every log in this sale would be exported directly from the stump to China, even though there is a mill in Southeast capable of processing 80 million board feet in just 1 year. Is it wise to promote an industry that is in direct conflict with the sustainable tourism and fishing industries, especially when the timber industry needs government support to survive? We can do better than this. We need to pursue industries that are compatible and complementary to the successful industries we already have. We need to think creatively and figure out new ways to diversify our economy, not fall back on industries with a history of failing the towns that relied on them. In my opinion, passage of Don Young's bill would be a big step backwards for Southeast Alaska. I urge the Petersburg Borough Assembly to vote to approve the resolution against H.R. 232. Okay, and number 2. My name is Marya Smets, and I represent myself and my business, Farragut Farm. I would like to express my concern about Don Young's bill, H.R. 232, and the effects it would have on my life and my community. Passage of this bill would result in the transfer of up to 2 million acres of Tongass National Forest to state ownership. The lands to be transferred would be chosen from what the U.S. Forest Service categorizes as productive forest lands, which are also the areas where most of the Forest Service's management activities occur. This transfer of land ownership could result in the loss of some or all of Petersburg's 100 Forest Service jobs. Without these jobs, many of our friends and neighbors would no longer have a way to support their families, leaving them with no option but to move away from Petersburg. If these folks are forced to relocate, it will obviously have a detrimental effect on our schools, businesses, and community organizations. As a small business owner in Petersburg, I know that many of these Forest Service families are some of my business's best and most loyal customers. If they are forced to leave town, the loss of these customers will have a huge impact on Farragut Farm's bottom line. I am also concerned with how Don Young's bill will affect tourism in our region. Petersburg's tourism industry is built around small ships and boats that specialize in nature-oriented outdoor activities. These boats and ships rely on scenic areas near Petersburg that would be part of H.R. 232's proposed land transfer. These areas include places like Thomas Bay, Farragut Bay, Port Houghton, Sandbourne Canal, and Endicott Arm. Active logging and large visible clear-cuts in our region would likely cause the many tour boats that currently base their operations out of Petersburg to seek services elsewhere. Several of these tour boats make regular stops in Farragut Bay to purchase vegetables from our farm to serve to their guests and crew. This arrangement allows us to sell more vegetables without having to make extra trips to town, and the income earned from these tour boats is critical to the success of our business. In summation, I believe that the combined effect of losing both our Forest Service and small tour boat customers would make it very difficult for Farragut Farm to stay in business. On behalf of myself and my business, I ask the Assembly to vote to approve the resolution against Don Young's H.R. 232. Thank you. All right. Okay, and then we have... Hello, this is from Christine Smith with Northwest Navigation. Hello, I'm writing to ask that you read my statement regarding H.R. 232 at the upcoming meeting March 20th. I have deep concerns about the transfer of 2 million acres of the Tongass National Forest to the state of Alaska. I fear it will not only endanger salmon habitat and fishing jobs, but it will also have a profound impact on tourism. Our small tour boat business brings people from all over the world to Petersburg to experience firsthand unaltered lands and continuous habitat. Our guests also stay at the hotels and B&Bs. They go charter fishing, eat at the restaurants, and buy mementos. The Tongass is a unique resource that and should remain intact if it is to be utilized to its fullest. I'm asking that the Borough Assembly not support H.R. 232, as I feel it will have a negative impact on tourism and fishing jobs. Thank you for your time, Christine Smith. And then we have something from Bill Bailey, who is the president of Pacific Catalyst 2 Incorporated. Greetings, community leaders. I am writing to add my voice to those expressing their concerns regarding the proposed State of Alaska takeover of lands currently located within the Tongass National Forest. First, a brief introduction. For the last 13 years, I have owned and operated a small charter business which has sailed the waters of Frederick Sound and Stevens Passage. Our cruises focus on the region's natural history and include daily walks and kayak explorations of the area's bays and estuaries. In 2016, I added a second vessel to my company and now transport between 200 and 250 guests through the area in the course of each summer season. Most of our trips either begin or end in Petersburg, which means that not only do our guests spend an afternoon shopping for gifts and mementos in the town's shops, but that we also re-provision our 2 boats in Petersburg, buy fuel, maintenance supplies, and pay moorage in the city's harbor. About 1/3 of our guests spend an additional day or 2 in town and use that time to further explore Mitkoff Island. Our program is very intentional in the pursuit of sustainable tourism. I am generally in support of regional stakeholders regaining control over federal lands, but not for the purposes of extractive exploitation of natural resources. For that reason, I am writing in the hope that my small voice can be heard as the Borough Council considers adding their own, somewhat louder voice to the debate surrounding the proposed transfer. If the purpose of the proposal was to ensure that the lands in question would be further and better protected under state control, I would be writing a letter of support. Instead, I am writing to make sure you understand what is at stake. My guests do not join our cruises to look at logged-off hillsides and silted-in salmon streams. They join us to experience and photograph some of the last remaining wilderness in the United States. They will not spend their money to look at stump farms, so I would have to redesign my routes and itineraries to continue to meet their expectations. That would mean having to drop Petersburg as a turnaround port and thus cause local merchants, lodging and restaurant owners, and the harbor itself to lose the tens of thousands of dollars that our guests and the guests of other similar tour companies spend each season in the area. I would point out that once the areas are logged, that is the end of any short-term financial benefit to the local economy. Alternatively, our operation has and will hopefully continue to add many thousands to the borough's bottom line each and every year. As a small business owner, I see the value in consistent and predictable cash flow over a boom-bust cycle that is the earmark of extractive development. Once the trees are gone, and they will be gone quickly, it will take generations before they can be harvested again. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this issue. Regards, Bill Bailey. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And if there's no one else that wants to speak to items related to the agenda, then we will move on to visitors' views unrelated to the agenda. Is there anyone that has an issue that they wanted to speak to that is unrelated to tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we will move on to board, commission, and committee reports. None have been filed. The next item is the consent agenda, and we have two items. The first is 17-080, and that's the liquor license renewal for Joan Mai Family Restaurant. And I would need a motion.
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Castro, that we approve the liquor license renewal for Joan Mai Restaurant. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Oop. On the phone, is there someone who wants to weigh in? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Mark?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
All right, and that passes. The next item is 17-081, the Petersburg Chamber of Commerce gaming permit, and they have had gaming permits in the past. This is a request approving their 2017 gaming permit, and the purpose of which is, if the letter will pull up. Mine is not pulling up, but they use it for community administration and other items. Do I have a motion to approve?
So move. Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Stanton-Greger, that we approve the permit, the gaming permit for the Chamber of Commerce. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Eric?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Thank you.
And that passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is the report of other officers. There have been no reports filed. And then the next item on the agenda is the mayor's report. Would you like to read that, Mark, or would you like me to?
Could you read it, Cindy? If you're going to add anything about the Southeast Conference, I'll just listen, and if there's anything that I need to interject, I could add to it afterwards. Does that work?
That works just fine. So the first item on the mayor's report is seeking letters of interest. The borough is seeking letters of interest from Petersburg residents willing to serve on the hospital board until the October 2017 municipal election. There are 2 vacant seats, and letters of interest may be addressed to the borough clerk and emailed to dthompson@petersburgak.gov, mailed to P.O. Box 329, Petersburg 99833, or they can be dropped off at the Borough Administration Office here at 12 South Nordic Drive. We also have vacancies on the Historic Preservation Commission. The borough is seeking letters of interest for 3 vacant seats on the Historic Preservation Commission. Seat 1 is reserved for an archaeologist or an at-large member, and the term of this seat ends 12/31/2017. Seat 2 is reserved for an assembly member with a term ending 12/31/2019. And seat 3 is reserved for a planning commissioner with a term ending 12/31/2018. Letters of interest may be submitted to the Borough Clerk as outlined earlier in this report. If we do not get people to fill this position, does this commission go away at the end of the year?
After 2 years of no meetings.
Okay. Just to clarify that, thank you. Southeast Conference Mid-Session Summit. Mayor Jensen and Vice Mayor Lagadakis attended Southeast Conference in Juneau last week, and will provide an overview, and I'll get back to that. And then there's a budget work session reminder. There will be a work session held on Friday, March 24th at 9 a.m. in the Assembly Chambers to review the proposed FY 2018 enterprise funds and motor pool budgets. Is there anything you wanted to say about Southeast Conference, Mark?
I just wanted to mention that I did have a conversation. We talked at the last meeting that I ran into Commissioner Lincoln from DOT. I just asked him what the state's position was on our harbors that we voted to not take over with what they had offered us money-wise. And the state has no new position, and they will just keep them in place as long as they're safe. And if some private entity or government wanted to take them over, they would be willing to sell them. They transfer them. But that was about the end of that discussion. And there wasn't really much. So I heard your talk on rural business today, and you pretty much covered it, I think.
Well, and then we both had the conversation with Hani folks and representatives from the seafood industry down in Seattle about mariculture proposals for Southeast Alaska, and that was kind of an interesting conversation, trying to encourage shellfish and kelp farming in this general area.
Yeah, true, and a big contact, Marcus is the guy's name, and you spoke to him as well, and he said he would be willing to come to Petersburg if we found fishermen that were interested, or anybody that was interested in, having a presentation. So, one other thing I did find out today is you guys probably all have heard too, that our lands bill for Formula Bill, Senate Bill 28, has been over the Senate floor, I believe, and it will be in the resources next week sometime. So hopefully that moves forward and gets through the legislative session this session.
All right. So.
And I did find mute buttons.
Ah, good. And moving on, the next item on the agenda is the manager's report.
Thank you, ma'am. Just a heads up to everyone, many borough facilities will be closed on Monday, 3/27 for Seward's Day. Parks and Rec has begun planning their work for multiple events this summer. This includes the Children's Health Fair on April 8th from 10 to 12, the Ducky Dive on 4/15 from 12 to 3, the Little Norway Festival, and the 4th of July. We have been getting a false alarm indication on the Main Street sub-transformer. It just doesn't affect anything other than people if they see it. We're planning on replacing, it's just a faulty switch, and when we go to do our scheduled maintenance this year where we go on diesel, we'll take that opportunity to fix it. We'll also get through the top of this unit, which often gets branches, leaves, and moss in it because of size and close proximity to a grove of trees. Thanks to Joe, he's been working with Chandra at Parks and Rec. We're trying to figure out a affordable method to light the back parking lot at Parks and Rec. It gets a little dark, particularly in the wintertime, and we're hoping we can find some lights so we can attach to the back of the building rather than having to set poles, and try to get a little bit better lighting back there without disturbing neighbors with spotlights shining in their windows. We did discover that several of the streetlights adjacent to the police station were fed from the old electric service, which was recently de-energized. Basically connections we had no idea that existed. Power and Light is putting together a new feed from the power plant, and we expect to have the lights back on in operation sometime this week. We do have Millard Associates Architects under contract at this point for the construction phase of the Power and Light building remodel project. I signed the paperwork on that last week, and we should have that out on the street to start working on getting bids here shortly. Also, Joe and Power and Light have been working with Mike Lure on the replacement of the Elks Lodge oil fire boilers with electric units. Our involvement comes into, because of the extra load, we'll need to add on and upgrade some of the transformers and service conductors in that area. Jody wanted me to remind everyone that property assessment notices were mailed out on March 1st. The land values within the town have been revalued, and if you live within the original Petersburg town site, it is very likely that your land value has changed. This is the area between downtown, North Nordic, Sandy Beach, and Houghton Drive. The only chance that folks have to appeal this value is in the month of March. So we got just another week or two here. Appeal forms can be found on the borough's website on the Finance Department page. As of March 14th, we had received 8 property tax appeals. Again, that would be what the Assembly will meet as the Board of Equalization once we have all of those in. We're asking folks just to be aware and to check your vessels in the harbor on a fairly regular basis. Over the last few weeks, we've had reports of people breaking into vessels and sleeping in them at night. If anyone notices disturbances, please notify the police as soon as possible. It's hard for us to come back behind the issue weeks later and do much of an investigation. So, the library's new website is up. It is psglib.org. We're still in the testing phase, but we are encouraging folks to go out there and get comments and suggestions for improvements to the library. Firefighter 1 class is going very well. We've been averaging 10 people per class. This is a big deal to us. We've been short on volunteers for a while, and not just in firefighting, but EMS as well. But congratulations to those folks who are sticking with it. Sandy went through, with some help, going through the process of the state EMS recertification for 11 people that are out there running our ambulances for us. 8 EMT2s and 3 EMT3s. So, congratulations to them. Sandy has also been recertified as an American Heart Association Basic Life Support Instructor and recertified as an Alaska ETT and EMT1 instructor. This is real important from a standpoint of keeping our costs down, that she can do this and we don't have to send these folks out for training or bring trainers in. Wanted to put out a special thanks to PFI for hosting and cooking. This included to you and Hammer and Weekon for donating food, and to the public for attending the community brunch to benefit the fire department on March 12th. It was a well-attended event, and lots of community organizations and businesses contributed to honor our firemen, EMS, and search and rescue groups. Public Works crew has finished moving things out of the PI building. We have finished our move out of there and moved into here. We are still in the process of unpacking and working out details like squealing mics. We'll get through that. We do have some items still in storage that we'll work on getting in here or relocated, and we are hoping to move community development into this building in the next week or two. So that'll finish up that part of the move. The demolition of the burned out, dangerous building on Lumber Street is, well, this may not sound as much, it was on hold because we had a lot of snow. Carl, as the snow melts away here pretty quick, we'll be able to start on that and get that, as well as the debris around it, in conjunction with working with the owner of the entire complex. So that should be coming shortly. And P&D has submitted a draft design for the City Creek Dam spillway repairs. which is currently being reviewed by Public Works and the Water Department staff to make sure it meets our needs, and then we'll send it back to them with comments. So that's it, unless there's questions.
Any questions? I only have one, and we don't have it on the agenda, but it looks like we need to set up a date for the Board of Equalization. Does that have to happen in March, or can it happen after?
Isn't the date set for that?
Yes, I think it is. First reading in April?
I believe it's the first meeting in April.
Okay. And then with that, I am going to call a 5-minute break until 7:10, and then we'll start on unfinished business. We need to get started. Where's Eric?
You don't have to.
My district ranger does.
All right, we're calling the meeting back into order. And the next item on the agenda is unfinished business. And we have one ordinance for third and final reading that I think wins the award for the longest title for an ordinance.
That's our attorney wrote it.
It's ordinance 17-02, an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code Charter 2.44, initiative and referendum, to change the timing requirements to submit matters proposed by initiative or referendum to the qualified voters of the borough so that they are the same as submitting a proposed charter amendment to the voters, and to remove any mandate of holding a special election. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn to approve this ordinance. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call a roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes. And that ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to new business, ordinance 17-03, an ordinance amending Petersburg Municipal Code sections 14.20.070 and 14.20.390A1 municipal harbors to eliminate a prepayment discount on annual mortgage rates and to increase the minimum rental term to qualify for the annual mortgage rates. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Lynn to approve ordinance 17-03. Is there any discussion?
I was wondering if Glo could speak to this for people listening at home, if possible.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the first part of it has to do with the elimination of a prepayment. Historically, I don't know how many years ago, many years ago, we implemented a 10% savings if you prepaid your annual mortgage a year in advance. Most of that was because we have a lot of seasonal people that are leaving for big parts of the year and would run the risk of being in the rears and having interest on their account. Now we have a lot of people that are on a monthly payment. We don't seem to have as much need for that particular reason. It's a sure nice perk for those people that can afford to prepay their mortgage, and people do take advantage of it. We lose, if you want to call it losing, roughly between $22,000 and $30,000 a year in our budget because of this 10% break. And so when we had last year, we had the waterfront master plan done for our community. One of the portions of it was to do an economic study of our rates, and the group that Northern Economics did the rate study, and they explained to us in order to properly prepare for the future, we should, across the board, implement a 12% increase on all our rates, from everything from skiff fees to launch ramps to moorage. And so in talking with Jody, she suggested this would be a good first step and probably enough money that we wouldn't have to raise moorage, the 12%. We could get away with doing away with this and then raise moorage next year like 9%. So it's one of those things as part of a two-phase process in raising our rates in the harbor in order to cover expenses far down in the future. So that's the way we're approaching it. We'd had a pretty drastic rate increase 2 years ago, and I don't feel good about, going back to the boat owners quite yet. And so if we can push that down the road a year and implement this one little step this year, and then we'll have a year to really talk about across the board raises in order to comply with that rate study that we spent a lot of money as a borough to do, and so we have to take that, as into consideration for planning for the future. So that's that part of it. The other part of it is just kind of cleaning up some language. It's right now we have a transient rate, we have a semi-annual rate that covers the transient rate covers the first 2 months of somebody's calling Petersburg home if they're gonna do that. The semi-annual rate is 3 to 6 months, and then it should have been 7 months and more to get the annual rate. Right now it reads 6 months or more, so there's that kind of overlap of the semi-annual rate is 3 to 6 months, and then the annual rate is 6 months to forever. So it's just cleaning that up. So those are the 2 points that we're bringing forward.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, Bob.
Chloe, so if we implement this, where does this put us in relationship to the study that was recently done saying that we do need to raise mortgage rates and give us a target of which we need to do?
Well, what it'll do is it'll take raising. What they suggested was 12% across the board. So by taking the 10% off, we'll only have to raise moorage 9% next year is what we figure.
9% next year, did you say?
Yes.
Thank you.
Glo, you mentioned this would be part of a two-step process. Would this be the end of it, or would there be more tiers to the annual increase of mortgage rates?
Right now, they're thinking that it's one of those things that we look at every 3 to 5 years, and that's kept us in pretty good shape. Again, I remind you that we're second to the highest rates in Southeast Alaska, so we do have that to always keep us honest. We don't like to be the most expensive, but we're the second most expensive, and so that seems to be the pattern that has worked well between 3 to 5 years. So I'm not saying, further down the line we're not going to have a rate increase. The one thing that we do have looming in 2021, which is kind of a nice buffer, is we won't have to pay back a harbor bond. It'll be all done in 2021. So if we do this rate increase in next year, then the next rate increase, which would come kind of in that 2021-22, will be saving about $120,000 in payments out, which is 10% of our budget right now. So that would be, I'm hoping that would be enough for quite a while.
Well, thank you.
If I may?
Yes.
And Glo, I'm sure you probably know the numbers better than I do. One of the things the consultant recommended was they wanted us to increase the rates 12% year one, and then another 20% over the next, was it 10 years or something in the neighborhood of that? So we've tried to approach this in a way that's a little less harsh, and what's important, we paid a lot of money for these folks to do the economic analysis of our harbor and the infrastructure, but we also don't want to chase people away either. So I think this is, as Glo said, this is a really good first step, and then that'll give us time to talk about the 9% or some version of that for the next year.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
And ordinance 17-03 passes unanimously. The next item on the agenda is Resolution 17-06, a resolution authorizing initiation of a local improvement district for paving of borough streets. And this would authorize Public Works Director Hegerman to move forward with a local improvement district process using an updated timeline. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand and seconded by Member Stanton Greger that we approve Resolution 17-06. Is there any discussion?
So yeah, I was hoping to talk to Carl. Hear from Carl.
Thank you. Carl Hagerman, Public Works Director. Deja vu, I realize this issue just keeps going on and on. So there are a couple reasons this is in front of you again. First and foremost probably is because the resolution that was passed before was somewhat invalidated by the rewriting of the ordinance. Some things changed in the ordinance that the previous resolution did not reflect what we're living under now as a law. So we needed to correct those things. Additionally, as time goes by, the budget discussions are in full force right now at the local level, and this process does require that the borough upfront the money for any paving LIDs that happen to make it through the process and land on the desk of the assembly. So I did want to make sure that the assembly was still fully in support, or the majority was still in support of this program. There's a lot of work that would go into this to get the information out to the residents, and it'll be a hard decision for those folks to make. If they do decide to move forward with an LID to pave their own street, it would be nice to have the support of the assembly so that all that was not for naught.
Have there been any residents that have approached you about the possibility of having an LID in their area?
There are some folks that are interested in it, for sure, yes.
That's good to hear.
And Carl, speaking for not, you spoke of earlier of how our asphalt machine is going to be in town likely until summertime, but yet you have paving here August through September.
That's right, yeah. Good catch. I've been checking with CCON every month or so to find out if they have a different plan yet. Right now, they do not. And unfortunately, I think it's a sad sign of the times. Budget crunches. There are less projects out there, fewer projects for paving, and so I guess the benefit to us is that CCON is not planning on moving that plant anytime soon. It still may happen. And pushing the paving schedule out this late in the year, the risk is higher than it would have been if we'd have gotten a project lined up for early summer. But that being said, they do want to support paving in Petersburg, and they made the comment that even if they moved it out, they would bring it back if we had a project. But unfortunately, there's a cost associated with that, and in my opinion, that probably pushes the project out the door if it does go out of town. So anyway, they are right now not planning on moving it, but that could change at any time.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Nancy.
And this addresses any neighborhood that might want it, not just the first two that you suggested. And is it going to be in effect after CCON leaves if somebody wants to do it in spite of the increased cost?
Yes. To answer your first question, in any neighborhood, even neighborhoods that are not on my targeted list, can go through the process of circulating petitions and bring that forward to the borough. And at any time before or after the paving plant leaves, they can bring this forward, just knowing that the costs are going to be substantially higher after the paving plant leaves town. And the LIDs don't only pertain to paving. They can apply to utility projects or basic street resurfacing projects, other things that a neighborhood sees as a need but isn't on our capital improvement list.
Thank you.
Carl, I'm pretty aware of the mobilization costs oftentimes to get heavy equipment in different areas, but perhaps you'd be able to inform the public about the cost that we might have to deal with, contend with, to bring the paver back into town.
Standard cost that we've been told over time is that it's about $100,000 to move a plant in and set it up, tear it down, and get it out of here again. So that's a substantial cost. The CCON said that one opportunity that might come up with their plant is a job in Wrangell, and so that's not terribly far away for them to come back. But again, he emphasized that the real cost is in the setup and breakdown of the plant. So we're still looking at a minimum of $30,000 to get the plant back if it leaves town, and that's if it goes to Wrangell.
Okay, thank you.
Carl, I just wanted to thank you and your staff for putting the time in on this and giving residents an opportunity to invest in their infrastructure that is their streets if they so want the opportunity. Thanks.
Welcome.
All right. Have we plumbed Carl for everything we can?
For now.
No pun intended there.
Hey, Cindy, I have a question.
Yes.
It sounds to me like the borough has to upfront the money for this, for the improvements if the neighborhood votes for this. One, my question is, do we have the money? But then actually depends on what the amount would be. And I'm concerned with, just the state of our local economy. And there's some people that aren't, doing real well in certain neighborhoods. I'm sure that 50% of the people vote for them to, if so many people vote to move it forward, then they have to come up with the money. And so I don't think I'm going to be in favor of this. I just wanted to make that statement. So thanks.
Did you want to respond to that, Carl?
Well, just for the Assembly's information, the total list of streets right now, if they were all to go forward, which is highly unlikely, we're looking at about $350,000 up front. The terms of payback, I think what I would recommend is about a 10-year payback. It really takes those costs and turns it right into $300 or $400 per year range for most of these streets, which may or may not be affordable. And that's the big question is who can afford it and who can't, and that's got merit to it as well. So.
Can you hear his answer, Mark?
Yeah, I'm hearing some people better than others. So, but I kind of got the dollar value there. Yeah, thanks.
The other point, and I've been in your shoes, that's why I asked that question. I wanted to make the point that when we went through this before, there were several process points that the Assembly would have to approve. And so if we had concerns for our budget or for the ability for folks to pay, we would have another opportunity during the approval process to say yay or nay, the LID should go forward. So just putting this, authorizing this resolution would not necessarily force anybody to pay anything, including the borough.
That is correct.
Yeah, I understand that, and I didn't vote for the last time this was addressed either, so I just have concern with it.
Understood. Is there any other discussion?
I'm just going to say I have problems with the 50% because I've also got quite a number of people have talked to me about it, that they don't have the money, and they'd be forced into it, and so I have to vote no on this, just so people know where I'm at.
A point of clarification, the 50% does apply to the petition to get it considered. If a petition with 50% of a neighborhood's residents sign up for the LID or to find out more about it, that's really all they're doing, then we have 60 days to come up with a plan and an initial assessment role. This timeline has that pared down to 30 days. We also need a 30-day notice on a public hearing to discuss that with those folks. So another 30 days from then, we have a public hearing, and after that public hearing, we go through a balloting process, and then the threshold rises to 66%. 66% of the neighborhood needs to approve of the LID before it goes forward. So just to clarify that.
All right. Hearing no other discussion, will the clerk call the roll?
Mark?
No.
Cindy?
Yes.
Bob?
No.
Nancy?
Yes.
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
And that passes 4-2. Moving on to Resolution 1707, a resolution opposing H.R. 232, the State National Forest Management Act of 2017, and the severe economic and other burdens the bill would impose on Petersburg and other southeast communities. Do we have a motion to move forward?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand, moved by Member Stanton-Gregor, seconded by Member Strand, to approve Resolution 1707. Is there any discussion? Go ahead.
Sure. So I'm going to just read a little something. I'm now a fish biologist, but my last 8 years of time working for the Forest Service was as a fisheries component of the pre-sale timber process. I know exactly what the procedure is for the buffering of fish streams, as I have hung the flagging that helps tell foresters which stream to protect due to the presence of fish or a fish habitat. But personally, and speaking solely as a citizen of Petersburg and as an aficionado of the outdoors and the beauty of the landscape, I would prefer the public process involved with the federal sale of timber because one can be assured that everyone has an opportunity to voice their objections. I am not so sure of what happens with the state process, and the lack of transparency makes me nervous. I wanted to speak my opinion, since that is what I'm expected to do as an elected official, but after speaking with my district ranger, I will need to recuse myself from this vote due to the relationship between the many hats I wear in this community.
Did you have a comment?
Yeah. I don't support the bill itself. And when you read it, it has a number of problems with it. It's one of the things is that when that land transfers in title to the state of Alaska, the state can then do anything they want with it, regardless of what it is. They could sell it. They could do anything. There's another section in there that talks about the industry. And it says you will meet the needs of all of industry of Alaska. And I'm not quite sure how you interpret that. So does that mean that you keep cutting it until you run out? There's no sustained yield? I see a problem with that. But I also can't support the resolution as written. I think there's a couple statements in there that, to me, are not in the best interest of the borough. I don't agree with the statements on the Alaska Timber Job Task Force. I think if you look at our economy here in southeast Alaska, we have about everything is subsidized. The airline's subsidized, the highway system's subsidized. Every time we turn around, we're subsidized. So I can't agree with part of that. I think we need a sustainable industry across the board. And I think from my perspective, this resolution needs to be rewritten to do what we as a borough think we should have or in the longer term. Although I don't support House Bill 232. So just for the record, I will be voting no.
So to respond to your comment about the Alaska Timber Jobs Force, because I drafted this resolution, the language comes directly from the website for the Alaska Timber Jobs website.
Right.
I have not interjected anything. If you wanted to make an amendment to withdraw that whereas, I would not object to that.
I've thought about that, Cindy, but there's about 5 of them I'd like to make amendments to, and I heard a couple of statements here I'd like to add to. And so I think, frankly, we believe it needs to be rewritten. So okay. I'm still, I don't want to waste the time to go through those motions here. It'd take us half an hour or so to do this. So I would like to, I would make a motion to table it till the next meeting and rewrite it.
Was that a full motion?
I'd second that motion.
Okay. I think that tables, I don't think we need a vote on that, do we? I think. When somebody makes a motion to table, it's tabled.
Yep, I think so.
So we will table that and we will take it up at the next meeting.
Okay.
But I do want to thank everybody who came and spoke on the issue and provided letters. And then the next item on the agenda is 17-087, completed retail marijuana store application notification for the 420. And the Alcohol and Marijuana Control Board has given the borough notice that a completed application for a retail marijuana store license has been filed by the 420. The retail store will be located at 307 North Nordic Drive if final approval is granted. The Borough Assembly has the opportunity to protest the approval of the application or support the approval of the application. And do I have a motion to accept the completed application?
So move.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Strand. We'll give this one to Member Lynn for the second. And is there any discussion?
I wanted to make a comment to the business owner. Nice work navigating the maze that is the nice work navigating the state website and going through the many hoops you've had to go through, and I wish you luck in your business endeavors.
You wish you luck.
Oh, okay. I really don't even what he just said. I can't.
Bummer.
I heard that. I did. Thank you very much.
Are we speaking too low? Are we speaking too low?
I haven't heard most of it.
Okay, that's good feedback.
That was much better.
Okay, we'll speak up a little bit. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk call the roll?
Bob?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes.
Jay?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Eric?
Yes.
And that is approved unanimously. Moving on to 17-088, the Petersburg Community Foundation request for donated office space, and Glo spoke to this at the beginning of the meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Member Stanton Greger and seconded by Member Lynn that we allow the Petersburg Community Foundation to have an office space in the new municipal building. Is there any discussion? Yes, Nancy.
I'm having trouble with this. I know they bring a lot of money to nonprofits, but space is tight here, and already. Would they be interested in perhaps moving in where Liz is moving out of?
I think Liz was the one that made the offer of the space, and unfortunately she's not here.
I think she was out of line making that offer. It's my understanding that that desk space she's talking about is earmarked for the assessor when he comes to town. So I just think maybe they should consider, if they want space, moving into space that's being vacated by the PEDC up in Public Works.
Cindy, ask the manager, do we have a policy? Do we have a policy in place that talks about what uses that we could give space for within the municipal building or other locations?
No, we do not.
Yeah, based on that, I think it's inappropriate at this point to give them space myself, unless we had a policy in place. And so, who do you give to and who you don't, and so forth. I don't think it's reasonable to do that.
Did you have a question, Eric? Okay. And my only argument in favor of it was that I believe Liz was the one that made the offer. It's for 24 hours a month. Was that what you said, Glo?
Roughly, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a large amount of time. And the Petersburg Community Foundation supports other qualified nonprofits within the community, so it is a broad base of support. So in essence, we wouldn't necessarily be favoring one nonprofit over the other because they help all of them. But go ahead.
I just think that it's a bad precedent.
Cindy?
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate what the Petersburg Community Foundation does for Petersburg. But, I kind of have a little bit of a problem with this setting a precedent here by giving office space to an organization. Down the road when funding, if it does get tighter, if someone else needs some space, not that the, Petersburg Community Foundation needs, is, lacking on funds, it doesn't sound like, and I understand that they need this to, donate a space for, part of their endeavor, but I just don't, I think we're setting a precedent that might come back to haunt us in the future, so that's my opinion on the matter. Thanks.
Is there any other discussion?
Well, it says here that there's up to 24 hours per month, and you had made mention, Strand, about splitting that with the assessor, or that's supposed to be the assessor's desk coming up, where you've heard that?
In addition to it being a bad precedent.
Okay.
I mean, then anybody can ask for free use of the space,
Mm-hmm.
We could add a third floor to the building and donate it to all kinds of people.
Yes, go ahead, Jay.
My own 2 cents, I'm not really worried about setting a bad precedent in the future. We can always say no. I don't see it as a precedent. I don't think any of these things have to be absolute. But more of a logistical question for the manager, if I could. In terms of space, do you see that being a major conflict in terms of splitting time with the assessor?
No.
And you guys are in that building. This is your building. You know better than I do.
The concept was getting the assessor close to where the maps are, because often they have to go back and look at maps. So that extra desk was convenient for the assessor. Doesn't mean we couldn't be just like we were when we were back in this building, where the assessor was upstairs in the small conference room and the maps were all downstairs. In other words, we could make it work regardless. It's kind of a 6 of one, half dozen another for us. Is it more convenient to have the assessor down there? Probably is. Sure. Okay. Does it ruin our day? No. Could they go in to where Liz is in second story of Public Works? That's a question you need to ask Carl. I mean, okay. Probably that's space we're going to vacate, but I'm not sure if anybody else has claimed it at this point. Not yet. So there you go.
Thank you.
So I'm trying to, in my head, see this as if it's any different than the Chamber of Commerce space that we have in the building over on First and Fram. But thinking about that, has the Community Foundation approached, is this the first place that they've asked for office space, or is this the last place that you've come to?
No, I think this is our first space.
Okay.
And, and make sure that, I'm just clarifying too, that Liz did not offer this.
Okay.
She suggested.
Okay.
Her suggestion was write a letter to the assembly, about this possibility. So she by no means went out of her, her pay scale there and offered space.
Right. Any other discussion? All right. Will the clerk call the roll?
Mark?
No.
Cindy?
Yes.
Nancy?
No.
Eric?
No.
Jay?
Yes.
Bob?
No.
And that fails 4-2. next item on our agenda is communications, and we received a thank you for the support for the Raven Trail reconstruction, and I guess I'll read the letter so that folks can hear. It says, Dear Petersburg Borough Assembly, the Petersburg Ranger District would like to formally thank the Petersburg Borough Assembly for its support during the multiple stages of the Raven Trail reconstruction. The Assembly's recognition was instrumental in obtaining Federal Lands Access Program funds to complete the initial construction phase on the first mile of the trail in 2015. In addition, the Assembly's most recent letter of support on May 16, 2016, was a key component in securing funding for the completion of the trail construction. With the available funding, construction will begin in 2019 and will be completed by the end of 2021. The Raven Trail is the Forest Service's only recreation trail in the town of Petersburg, which actually formally doesn't exist anymore, and its improvement has provided numerous benefits to the local and visiting public. The first mile has seen increased use and a high level of support from the community. Thanks again for your continued encouragement, and we look forward to continuing our partnership into the future. And it's signed David Zimmerman, who is the district ranger here. So that was very nice. And I would invite, the Forest Service has come before and given us periodic updates on what's going on with the Forest Service in the area. And I would extend that offer again for that to happen periodically. The next communication item is Greater Southeast Conservation Community Letter regarding HR 232. Is this one? Oh, Becky read this as part of her testimony.
I'm not sure if she read exactly this letter, but it is online in the packet if people would like to read it. It's rather long.
Okay, I was going to say it's kind of a long letter and covers the same points as the other discussion. And then the next item is a letter from local resident Tamara Evans supporting the request by Holly Winge to stop adding fluoride to Petersburg's water supply. For some reason, not everything is popping up on my computer, and the letter is not. It downloaded earlier today, and I was able to read it. It is not coming up now. But it basically recaps some of the same issues that Holly had with health concerns and asks for some...
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I can read it real quick. I would like to offer my support to Holly Winche and request the borough reevaluates the practice of adding fluoride to our water supply. It's time to investigate what the current research is on the safety of fluoride after so many years of public use. I found that fluoride in drinking water does give dental benefits to people across the board, and over I read the benefits outweigh the risks. But that made me wonder if there are recognized risks associated with fluoride introduced into the drinking water of municipalities. Why don't we find out what they are? While the benefits of fluoridation have been held to be unquestionable, accumulating evidence points to a frightening prospect that fluoride may have serious adverse health effects, including infant mortality, congenital defects, and IQ. And that's from democracynow.org in 2004. That was 13 years ago. I wonder what new research is out there about fluoridating public water. Shouldn't we find out? Do the people measuring the fluoride into our water supply wear masks and gloves? Do the bags or drums of fluoride come with warning labels? Is their health at risk? They already have to handle chlorine, which is also dangerous in concentration, yet chlorine is easy to remove from your water if you don't want to drink it. Fluoride is more troublesome. I have compromised teeth from not taking care of them when I was a kid. Fluoride in the water may have helped my teeth, but what about its impact on the rest of my body? Can't we decide as individuals to use fluoride mouthwash or toothpaste if we like the benefits? Consider this. Currently, the increasing knowledge of the activation of G proteins by fluoride compounds suggests that such effects may result in corollary effects of fluoride on vesicle traffic, cell migration, cell proliferation, gene expression, and other key functions in the cell. However, the complexity of fluoride's effects on these processes should be appreciated because the effects induced by fluoride are closely related to dose and concentration, the hormesis effect. Furthermore, even though some studies report no clear evidence on the potential negative effects of fluoride exposure at permissible concentrations, e.g. studies that support water fluoridation, others have shown evidence of fluoride's effects on cellular processes at biologically relevant concentrations. When discussing these controversial results, it's important to highlight that fluoride must be actively considered as a potent toxic compound in the field of toxicology, both in epidemiologic, ecological research and in fundamental or applied research. In conclusion, this evidence of the positive and negative effects of fluoride needs to be considered along with the ethical, environmental, ecological, financial, and legal issues that surround any decisions about water fluoridation. And that's a quote from an article in Molecular Mechanisms of Fluoride Toxicity. That's the title of the article, in Chemical Biological Interactions. And then she goes on, for me, the real crux of the matter is this. I did not want fluoride in my water, but the majority of the voting citizens did. Democracy at work, fair enough. Yet I wonder why does someone else get to make that decision about my health for me? Why does someone else get to weigh the good against the harm in regards to what I put into my body? Anytime you are dosing a whole town with a chemical, I believe it would be a good idea to study current research to see if there's any new information on the effect of the chemical on the human body. I do not have much faith in those that deem a chemical benign or a drug safe. So often it is found 10 to 20 years down the road that, by golly, chemicals such as DDT and drugs such as thalidomide and OxyContin aren't that harmless after all, and those companies pushing them and still have much to gain. Respectfully yours, Tamara Evans. And are there any other communications to report? And I have just one, and that is that I heard from Tom Reinartz of Kupernoff that they had applied for a RAC grant as an access point for the Forest Service Trail, and they were awarded $40,000 to work on the T end of the dock on the Kupernoff side. So they will be undertaking that pretty soon. And then the next item is assembly discussion items. And the first item is recognitions. Are there any recognitions? Yes, Jay.
I would just like to take the time to recognize the many people who showed up tonight in opposition to H.R. 232. I think you all raised very, very valid points. I think H.R. 232 is, in short, horrible in every way for Petersburg and all that we are, to put it simply. So just again, thank you all so much for turning out tonight to offer us your 2 cents. I humbly agree with the feedback offered.
Anybody?
Cindy?
Yes.
I would like to recognize our Petersburg Vikings boys basketball team for taking the state title this year. So, congratulations, boys. Good job.
Yeah. Yes, yay. And I would like to recognize Jasmine Iramia for taking the time and effort to go up to Juneau and testify before the legislature on behalf of Petersburg schools, well, and schools in general, school funding. So pretty cool for a high schooler to take the effort to do that. Then the next item, discussion item, is ATV use on borough roads, and local resident Richard Burke would like to have the option to legally drive ATVs and UTVs on borough streets, and he plans to submit an application initiative petition on this subject. And he spoke to that earlier. And with that, we are going to, we have to have a motion to close and go into executive session.
So moved.
It's been moved by Member Strand, seconded by Member Greger to move to executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.
Do we have to state the reason we're going into the executive session?
I'm sorry. Good point. The Assembly will adjourn to executive session to discuss with the Borough Manager and negotiating team the bargaining positions and negotiating points to be considered in the upcoming contract negotiations with Alaska Public Employees Association and Petersburg Municipal Employees Association.